All right, Ecclesiastes chapter 5. Let's begin there with verses 1 through 7 as he gives us some admonitions here. Ecclesiastes 5, 1 through 7. We'll read that for us. Charles.
Walk prudently when you go to the house of God. Draw near to fear rather than to fear the sacrifice of food, for they do not know that they do evil. Do not be rash with your mouth, and let not your heart utter anything hastily before God. For God is in heaven and you are on earth. Therefore let your words be few. For a dream comes through much activity, and a fool's voice is known by his many words. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to pay it, for he has no pleasure in food. Pay what you have vowed. Better not to vow than to vow and not pay. Do not let your mouth cause your flesh to sin, nor say before the merciful God that it was an error. Why should God be angry at your excuse and destroy the work of your hands? For in the multitude of dreams and many words there is also vanity, but fear God.
Okay. So he gives us an admonition about when we come before God. And question number 1, I'd ask you to name the activity in verse 1 and then explain or give examples of what the sacrifice of fools is. So what's the activity there in verse 1?
Worshiping.
And how do we know that?
Well, he says that when you go to the house of God, and that was the place of which they presented themselves before God.
Yes.
Worshiped God.
Yes, exactly right. So in Solomon's time, of course, really he'd be talking about the temple, maybe the tabernacle before the temple was built, but understanding Ecclesiastes written later in his life, the temple is in place. That's where they're gathering. That's where they're worshiping, offering up sacrifices to God. So going to the house of God, he's essentially saying when you go before God to worship Him. And so as we think about that, one of the things it's pointing to in the conclusion of the letter, of course, is we need God in our lives. We most definitely need Him when we face difficulties, trials, hardships. We need to be turning to God. We need to be going before God. We need to go before Him regularly. And recognize, this life is full of vanity. It's full of oppression. It's full of worthless pursuits, as he's already discussed in the letter. We'll continue to discuss. But when we go before God, as we seek that true meaning in life, we have to be careful. We have to be cautious. We need to take heed when we do that. And so going before God means that we need to have the right attitude. What does Jesus say about worship? What's one of the verses that stands out in the New Testament about worship when Jesus talks about it? What's that?
Spirit and truth.
Spirit and truth. Where's that found?
John 4:24.
Yes, John 4:24. Those who worship Him must worship Him in spirit and truth. So it's not just the acts or the proper actions that God has prescribed, but the spirit, the true engaging in the worship when we come before God. In 1 Corinthians 14 verse 40. 1 Corinthians 14 verse 40. Can you get someone to read that for us, please? Ron.
Let all things be done decently and in order.
Okay. What's the admonition? How does that apply? Paul is talking, 1 Corinthians 14, specifically about worship. Now, context is spiritual gifts, the abuse of them, chaos, and the assembly. But the principle, the point, all things done decently and in order. Anybody, how about that? Anything?
There's thought, preparation, organization, respect, and worship. Someone might want to teach something and someone else might want to sing something. That can't happen simultaneously, though teaching is done through singing, but that's done by one person to the group with a group. And so Paul is addressing there, you all have these various spiritual gifts, but they need to be done in moderation so that all the body is being built up in one activity at a time.
Right, exactly. If we're all trying to teach at the same time, there's an issue with that. And you know, I've seen some classes where the teacher competes with somebody in the class, and that's not good. That's not healthy. When we're singing, we're all singing, but why is that not a problem?
Singing the same song.
Same thing.
Hopefully. But yeah, the concept is we're all singing the same song. We're all, you know, we've got a leader who's keeping us, you know, going through the song together simultaneously. So that's why singing is not an issue with all of us speaking, teaching, and admonishing at the same time. Rick?
Just a simple statement, the lack of decently and in order would be chaos. And whenever you have chaos, there's no understanding, there can be no spirit in truth.
Right.
It's just madness.
Right, and in the context, part of what he addressed was somebody comes into your assembly and sees this, they think this is madness. Why would we ever want to be a part of that? And so for us as a group, we need to be mindful of our actions, our behavior in worship, because not only might we disrupt worship for those around us, but we could turn away a visitor who comes in and says, this is not right. When I was in the military in South Korea, the congregation over there, of course, with military congregations, you kind of get a mix of people from everywhere, all types of experiences and backgrounds and different things like that. But we met in a conference room. I was up preaching the sermon one Sunday, and one of the children, he was probably 3, he started doing laps around the conference table and back around behind me. The second or third time he came by, I snatched him. And then his dad got him and took him outside. Then he was running up and down the hall out there. But that type of thing is a violation of decently and in order. And that it can come in many different ways, so we want to be careful about that, because our attitude as well as our actions need to be acceptable before God and conducive to worship. Now back in Ecclesiastes 5 verse 1, he gives an admonition after he says, you know, walk prudently when you go into the house of God. He follows up with something. What is that?
Draw near to hear.
Draw near to hear. How might that apply?
Open your mind up so that what is being taught.
Okay. So maybe during the preaching, you're listening. You're engaged. You're not doing what? Yeah.
Anything.
You're not balancing your checkbook.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're not often planning for the week or all those things. Now, I'll say this. There are times when all of us, our minds drift. Instead of allowing that drift and just going with it and not paying it, we need to bring ourselves back to what is being done, to what is being said, right? How else might it apply to here outside of the preaching, the actual lessons being taught? Anything?
Pay attention to the words of the hymns.
Paying attention to the words of the hymns, right? Even though we're singing, will anybody be willing to admit this besides me? I've sung through entire hymns and not been in the hymn. So, Zach?
It applies to prayer. There's been prayers I couldn't say amen to, either because I wasn't listening or I wasn't comfortable with what was said. And I wasn't sure to give the person who said that the benefit of the doubt, or I knew what they meant and I couldn't. I would go maybe say something to them afterwards, but our amen has to be genuine as a silent prayer with the man leading it.
It's a part of our worship, right? And it's a good point about listening so you can say amen, or listening knowing I can't say amen to that. And there are occasions where it's like, what did he just pray? I'm not sure exactly what he means by that type thing. So yeah, so paying attention to all those times. So coming to hear, listen, absorb what's going on, being engaged in the worship service. That's what Solomon is admonishing right here. You need to be engaged in what you're doing. Don't walk in there lightly. Don't go before God like, you're just listening to the radio going down the highway or watching TV or sports or something, and your mind is in and out and all over the place. And it doesn't really matter on those occasions. It matters here for us to be engaged and listen. So he says, don't offer the sacrifice of fools. And I'd asked in that question, do you have an example or an explanation about sacrifice of fools? What might fit that? Mike?
I kind of thought of whenever we think we ought to come here just to kind of make our little check mark. You're sacrificing your time to come here, and that's not doing you any good. So you are being very foolish by thinking, I'll just kind of show up. And that's all that's required of you. Because, what he says is to make sure that make sure you're engaged. That's really what God wants.
Mm-hmm.
To be here. Is that, we just need to check mark, that's really all it is.
Well, what did Jesus say about the Pharisees in Matthew 15? You're hitting on that.
Draw near with your
Yeah, draw near with your mouth,
and
your lips.
with your lips, but your hearts are far from me.
Yeah, and in vain you worship me. As Mike's saying, we draw near coming and being in the assembly, and maybe we're doing the singing along. We're sitting here, but is our heart here and engaged? Mike?
Yeah, our time is one of the most precious things that we have, because you can't buy any of it, no matter how much money you have, you cannot buy 1 second. And if you're going to take the time to come here, get something out, be engaged, the type of student that God wants you to be in the classes, in the worship service, be a worshiper that God wants you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Rick, do you have something else?
I was going to start talking about the next verses, but...
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that very much. In Malachi chapter 1, he admonishes the people in verses 7 and 8 there, you offer defiled food on my altar, but say, in what way have we defiled you? By saying the table of the Lord is contemptible, and when you offer the blind as a sacrifice, is it not evil? When you offer the lame and the sick, is it not evil? Offer it to your governor, would he be pleased with you? So, when we come before God, we give him our best. We're fully engaged in it. We offer that worship that is acceptable in his sight. If we went to have an audience, if you will, of someone that was in a position of power, a position of influence, somebody that we respected, we give them our attention and we engage. If it'd be this way. So I don't know who you can think of. I want to be careful here. If there is in your mind a politician, past or present, a world leader, past or present, that you would be like, wow, if I had an hour with him, or if I had a half hour with him, to go in and be right there in their presence, be able to converse with them and hear them and what they would say to me, you know, we wouldn't go in there and for that half hour flip on our phones. Or we wouldn't be staring at out the window at the birds, and I know we can't do that here. But, you know, not being engaged is the point. We wouldn't do that. We would sit there and we would listen. And yes, we do this week after week after week, but there's a reason we do it week after week after week. Same reason we eat day after day after day after day, right? Because we need that nourishment. Nancy.
Well, and another aspect of it is we are the priests offering those sacrifices. We are the priests. And those priests were active during those worship services.
Yes. Yes. And they, because the law prescribed in great detail the manner of the sacrifice and all the things, they had to be mentally engaged in making sure they're doing all of that appropriately. So yeah. So don't offer the sacrifice of fools at worship that is unacceptable before God. So verses 2 and 3, if you have something, Rick, roll with it.
Just going to say the sacrifice of fools would be not being rash with your mouth.
Very good.
Not your heart utter anything hastily before God. And read on and continue on. But that basically is leading into that from the previous verse.
Yes, he engages in a specific example of what he's just mentioned there. So, question number 2, what is the warning about prayer and what are some examples? The rash with your mouth. Being rash there, what's another way to put this? Don't be rash with your mouth.
Careless.
Careless? Anything else?
Promises you can't keep.
Making promises you can't keep or you won't keep. You know, be careful what you say. Be careful how you say it before God. Don't be rash. Don't just let it roll out, you know. So, why might someone be rash with their mouth? Anger? Yeah. Anybody else? So I want to expound on that in a second.
Some people may be talking for themselves, or because they want to be out front. They just can't keep their mouth shut, so to speak. So it's important that we don't just talk to hear ourselves talk, because we can't be quiet. But it says here we need to be quiet. Because if you're thinking about what's being said, you're not going to be talking. If you're talking, you're more than likely not thinking.
Right, right. And you're certainly not really able to listen if you're trying to talk over something, as we talked a bit about a while ago.
But I think the meaning here is we're in communication with God when we're doing these things, and that's what the thought is. We need to be very careful because of the majesty and the power and the grace that God has shown us, that we need to be very careful on how we speak to Him, what we say to Him.
Yes, Carrie.
Well, I would also say that we can't impress God. And I think a lot of people talk, politicians are a good example, talking with the idea of trying to impress people and reminding us that we are speaking to God who's in heaven, while we are just a person on earth. There's nothing we can offer to Him that
Yeah, making, like in this context, making a boastful vow to God, like, I'm going to do something so great, God, I'm doing it for you because I honor and glorify you, like you're trying to impress Him. It's just not going to happen. Very good point. He's in heaven, we're on earth. So we can have that anger, we can have frustration, we can be filled with despair. Zach? Repetition.
Matthew 6:7. Jesus says, when you are praying, do not use meaningless repetition as the Gentiles do, for they suppose that they will be heard for their many words.
Yeah. Now, repetition is different than persistence. Jesus prayed the same prayer 3 times in the garden, but it wasn't vain repetition. He wasn't doing it as as almost like a chant or a trance, which is, I don't know if any of you ever seen, like, when I was in Israel and went down to the Wailing Wall, if you turn under to the left of the Wailing Wall, there's little classrooms where like Orthodox Jews are sitting in there and they're memorizing scripture and they rock back and forth and they just repeat again and again as though that's somehow, invoking God's blessings on them. And it's an odd thing to see people doing that. Philip?
My vain repetition has always kind of been, you get into the habit of saying the same prayer over and over and over again, and it's not heartfelt. It's just, I'm praying, and this is what I pray. Kind of like the people or the denominational one that prays the Lord's Prayer, and they say that. I mean, I know back when I was in high school playing basketball, the coach was a Baptist.
That was their standard go-to.
Standard go-to prayer. That's
Yeah.
Everybody had to pray that every time, even.
Yeah.
And so that, in my mind, that's vain repetition.
Yeah.
We're talking about Christ and him praying the same prayer. I mean, that wasn't vain repetition for him because it was heartfelt. He meant it. It wasn't just his go-to. I mean, he was fervently praying.
Right, exactly right. So, somebody coming before God and using rash words or making a rash vow, saying something rash before God, one of the things I wanted to point out is, people can do this out of an emotional state. Anger, frustration, desperation, exhilaration. They're really excited about something. And they'll approach God and say something they shouldn't say because they allow their emotions to guide or control that prayer versus allowing their rational mind and God's Word to control it. And what I mean by that is, emotion can prompt a prayer. Like if we're angry about something, it'd probably be good to go before God and say, help me with this. I'm struggling, but don't let the anger overwhelm. You're frustrated about something. You're happy, you're excited. It's appropriate to go before God and thank Him. But, don't be stupid about what you're saying and how you're acting before God in your relationship to Him. There's people in liberal churches that address God as Daddy. That is just irreverent. But that's where they go with excitement about, God and thinking about a relationship with Him. Philip?
Is what you're speaking of kind of like Jephthah's vow to
We're
God?
going to talk about Jephthah in just a little bit. Yeah, very good.
So would just an example of rashness, someone who prays a worldly prayer, praying for money and wealth, that's what they want.
Dear God, please help me win the lottery. That's foolish.
And that can spread in so many different directions, not just that. But
Yes.
other than what they should be focusing on when they come to God.
Yes.
So,
And by the way, an admonition for all the men who leads prayers publicly or getting up and teaching at any time, do not use a prayer for something personal. I've heard men get up and lead prayers and they're going after somebody. I mean, they got an axe to grind and they're going to grind it. Or they get in the pulpit, they got an axe to grind and man, they're going to grind it. No. We're leading everybody here in prayer when we're getting up to pray. We're teaching lessons. And yeah, there may be points that need to be made that people need to be helped, but sometimes it gets way, way too personal. It's like they have an agenda that they're just going to carry out. So, very careful, very good. Any other thoughts there? All right, so verses 4 through 7 then, our vows to God, our promises to God need to be well thought out. Acts 18, there's an example of where it talks about Paul. It just makes a quick reference about him having taken a vow and shaving his head. So vows are acceptable. They are appropriate. And Solomon's just giving an admonition here. Be very, very careful about it. Vows are often made in a time of trouble, when somebody's sick, or there's a financial crisis in their life, or they're under extreme stress, worried about situations, maybe a relationship or something. And what's his thrust? What's he driving at as he says, you make a vow, be sure what? Keep it, honor it. Don't delay. So do what you say. So Philip, Jephthah, where's he fit in all this? Anybody want to comment on Jephthah? What does Hebrews 11 say about Jephthah? Hero of faith. Wow. Why?
He kept his vow.
He kept his vow. Exactly right. He kept his vow.
Whatever that
Now,
means.
yeah, now there's some things when we go look at Jephthah and we scratch our head, now exactly what does that mean? And maybe one day we'll study that in some detail in a class. But there's a pretty good argument there that his daughter, while he said he was going to sacrifice her, she was redeemed, but she was still set apart, that she could never marry. And so she remained a virgin all of her life. But the idea is, even though that was rash, he followed through with it. Right? Whatever the vow was, however we understand the meaning of that, he followed through with it. Okay? What about that contrasted to Hannah? What kind of vow did Hannah make as she was before God? And remember, Eli thought she was drunk.
She would dedicate Samuel to the Lord.
She would dedicate her son to the Lord. If you give me a son, I'll dedicate him to you. What'd she do about all that? She meant it. She fulfilled it. Imagine how difficult that was for a mother who, once she weaned her child, she went and traveled to the tabernacle and turned him over to Eli, to her child that she had wanted for so long. And finally he's here, and then she turns him over to Eli. Right? She took a vow and she fulfilled it. Even though, no doubt, emotionally that was a great challenge for her to be able to do. So, yeah, those are two examples of it. One that you kind of cringe at. Another one, very admirable, very honorable in everything that she did and how she fulfilled it. So, any other thoughts on that? Zach?
Just a step down, I guess, but it's the same idea as not getting manipulated into making a promise before you hear. You make me a promise? Can you make me a promise? No, but it maybe depends on what it is,
Right.
But just.
Oh, how about this? I'm about to tell you something. Promise me you won't tell anybody. That's tough, right? Sometimes if you say, yeah, okay, I won't tell anyone, they lay it on you and it's like, okay, yeah, I won't tell anyone. Then sometimes you're like, oh boy, I really need to tell somebody. So to your point, yes, we have to be careful about those, let your yes be yes, your no, no. So we're committing to something. And this takes it, and I know that's relations among men, but when we're talking about going before God, Solomon's like, you had better make sure that what you've promised, you're going to do. Because God does not accept what?
Broken vows.
Broken vows. He, verse 4, has no pleasure in fools. Right? Pay what you vowed. Better not to vow than to vow and not pay. And of course what he's talking here about are things that are optional in our lives. It's better not to do it. If you're not fully committed, it's better just not to say, I'll do that.
And, going back to Hannah very quickly, but whenever she gave Samuel over, I think that Hannah ended up having more children after that.
Yes.
God blessed her because of what she had done.
Yes, he did. Exactly right. Exactly right. So that helped her in her life. Now, let me ask you this. What if the vow you make is contrary to the will of God? What do you do? Let me ask you this. In the Bible, in the New Testament, Herod threw a feast. His stepdaughter came in and danced before him. And he made a vow, he made a promise. Whatever you want up to half my kingdom, I'll give you. And she said, I want John's head on a platter. What does the Bible explain about what he did at that point? What was his reaction? How did he go through with that?
He was upset about it. He didn't want to do it.
He instantly regretted it, right? But because all the people sitting there, he ordered, went to prison, chopped off his head, brought it in. What should he have done?
Should have said, no, you can't have that.
Okay, that's not really what I meant. So what about that?
I always found it funny that he felt it necessary to keep that vow, but his wife's vow to her husband wasn't really that important to him.
Okay.
And so there's like this double standard and double life that he's living anyway, so I never really understood why.
It was his political power. His political power is what it boiled down to, Nancy.
Well, I was thinking about when the wives in the tribe of Judah took a vow to offer their drink offerings and their offerings to the Queen of Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeremiah came to them and actually cursed them for that. That was a vow that was against God, but those women were keeping it, and their husbands.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, he said that none of their names would be spoken in Judah again. And they were removed. But they made a vow that was against God.
So, John, go ahead. Well, the principle is, you make a vow against God, do not keep that. Absolutely do not. You can ask forgiveness, but I was foolish, I made the wrong vow, I never should have done that. That's a perfectly appropriate response. You know, Catholics, when they have a child and they take that child to be christened, they make a vow to raise that child as a Catholic. Well, what if someone in that situation learns the truth? Are they bound to raise that child as a Catholic? What if somebody's in an adulterous marriage and they learn the truth? Are they bound to keep that vow they took in that marriage ceremony?
No, because it never should have been made.
Exactly. It never should have been made to start with. Exactly right. John and then Zach, if you can hold that. John.
Well, I was thinking of Ananias and Sapphira when they made their pledge. So that was, this is talking about in these verses a free will offering that we make a vow for. Well, we better keep it. We see what Ananias and Sapphira did, but we think about the more simple things that we vow when we place membership at a local church. What are we agreeing to, or what are we pledging to do when we join ourselves to a local work and we don't show up? We don't contribute on the Lord's Day. We don't participate in the work of the church. Are we breaking our vow to God that we pledge to do as a Christian? Yes, we are. There's a lot of simple things that we take for granted that are vows that we pledge to God as Christians that we don't follow through on. We need to think about those things in this context.
We have commitments that we make, we enter into, because
We're in a covenant with God, we need to honor it.
we're in a covenant with God, and when we, like to your specific example, become a part of a local congregation, there's a compact that is there. There's an agreement of being a part of a local congregation. So that means we have certain responsibilities and duties within that congregation. Zach?
This kind of a question, wouldn't it be fair to categorize the negative examples that we were talking about as they weren't really vows because God wouldn't accept the vow of a Catholic parent to raise their child if they decided, God, that's not a real vow. That's a vow you concrete made in your mind, but God doesn't recognize that as a vow because it's contrary to his will anyway. Is that a thing?
Well, I understand what you're explaining. My perspective is when we look at it, we say, well, I promised to do this, or I vowed to do that. You know, especially in the marriage situation, when somebody's in an adulterous marriage and you lay that out to them, some of the pushback you get is, but I made a vow. Don't you think God wants me to keep my marriage vow? Yeah, God expects that when it's a lawful marriage vow. So like you're saying, there's lawful things and then there's unlawful. Yeah, that's how I put it. Mike?
I was also thinking that foolish vow that some of the Jews took. They said, if we don't kill Paul, we're never going to eat.
Yeah.
I think it's Acts 23 whenever they mentioned that. And, you know, just one of those rash vows that they took. I don't know. Maybe they starved to death. I really don't know.
Right.
They never killed Paul.
Yeah, I don't think so. So, pressing forward just a little bit here, you know, he says, you can't say it was a mistake. You can't come back and say, well, I really didn't mean it to start with. That's not going to wash with God. God knows what we said. God knows the intent we had when we said it. And if we then try to wiggle out of it, so to speak, then he's essentially saying, you know, God in his wrath is going to be stirred up against you. So don't go down that path. Be very careful. Be cautious about what you commit to, what you promise, when it comes to your relationship to God especially. All right. Let's read verses 8 and 9, please. Who'll grab that? 8 and 9. Philip.
If you see the oppression of the poor and the violent perversion of justice and righteousness in a province, do not marvel at the matter. For high official watches over high official, and higher officials over them. Moreover, the profit of the land is for all. Even the king is served from the field.
Okay. So, if you see the oppression of the poor, violent perversion of justice and righteousness in the province, what should you not do?
Don't be surprised.
Don't be surprised. Why? Why should you not be surprised at oppression, violence, perversion of justice?
Way in the world.
It's the way of the world. It's here. We should expect to see that. Now, we don't want it, we don't endorse it, but that is the world that we live in. There is oppression. So it's not like it's an uncommon thing. When it talks about the poor, the disadvantaged, financially, physically, mentally, that's there. And there's always going to be people who hold them down and oppress them, who don't treat them as respectful, decent human beings. They treat them lesser than. Violence, beating, prison, death, things like that, injustice, an attack on the righteous, all those things taking place. So question 3 I'd ask, what are 2 things Solomon notes about oppression that give a measure of comfort in the latter part of 8 and then flowing into 9? So what does he explain there? Do not marvel.
It seems like what he's saying is everybody's got a boss. Somewhere along the line, somewhere along the way, there's going to be corruption inside there.
Okay. Yes, there's going to be corruption. High official, somewhere in that system, there's going to be corruption. There's never been a system where there's not corruption. Systems of men and establishment of government, of rule, of authority, there's corruption. So when we look at our nation and our time, we shouldn't look at this and have this panic feeling about, this is just awful, this is terrible, what are we going to do? It's always been like this. Nothing new under the sun, right? But there's high official overseen by high official, overseen by high official. Everybody's got a boss. What about that?
Everybody does have a boss, and all these people have been put in place by God, who is the highest boss, so to speak. But can we not take away from this verse that sometimes it's better to have a government in place ruling over us, even though they might be unfair, but it's better than no government at all?
Well, I think, to me, it says sooner or later, one of those officials is going to see that something isn't right and maybe take care of it. It's not always true, but
Yeah.
sort of like, be sure your sins will find you out.
Okay. So, I want to use our nation or our friendly, easygoing neighbors to the north. That you see oppression, and what eventually happens with oppression? Eventually, somewhere down the road. It may be a while down the road, but it happens. But we've seen, I think, a capsule of it recently. Hey, we're tired of this. And, because we live in a democratic system, they live in a democratic system, the ultimate high official is who? The people. The populace is the ultimate high official that says, we're tired of this. You actually serve us, not us you. Now, there are different systems of government where it doesn't work that way. But, eventually along the way, these things have a tendency to swing back the other way. But to John's point, ultimately, everyone's going to give an account to God. And so while we may be disappointed, we may be troubled by oppression, violence, injustice, we can take a measure of comfort in God's going to call them all to account. It will happen. There may not be a whole lot we can do about it, but God can do something about that. So verse 9 then, I'm going to circle back to what John brought up a minute ago. What's he saying there in verse 9? What is the ESV? I think it's the ESV says something. The NASB gives a little different sense, but
this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields.
Okay, king committed to cultivated fields. The New King James, just as a reminder for those who have a different, profitable land is for all, even the king is served from the field. What's the concept there? In either way, it's essentially driving at the same point.
Well, to me, it's saying that there is a system, that it is functioning, and basically it's a peaceful system. It's not a warring nation, it's a peaceful nation.
Okay?
Would this not teach trickle-down economics from the Bible?
Well, the Bible most certainly does teach that. But the king is served by the field. He's got to have somebody out there. He ain't plowing it. He's got to have somebody that's in some form of cooperation or, functioning and out there working. It's not as though he's going to lock everybody down and can't, nobody can ever do anything, because he's served by the land. So the king has servants out there, and he can be oppressive, but that oppression can only go so far before he cuts himself off at the knees, right? So back to John's point, there is this idea being presented here. Look, you got these high officials, you have a king and you have his counselors or whoever in control, and man, they've got a tight grip on everything, and they're they're holding certain segments of the population down, they're abusing here and abusing there. But what's on the other end of that spectrum? Anarchy. What happens in anarchy?
Everyone does what's right in their own eyes.
Right. So, if that motorcycle gang group of guys who have their, their crack house or whatever, I don't know, that they've got it a half mile down the road, if they want to come to my house and they want to, abuse us, destroy, right over. So abuse us, destroy and take all my stuff and murder me and my family in a system of anarchy, what's going to be done? Not a thing. Not a thing. If there is an iron-fisted government in control, what's likely going to happen? They're going to go after, they may not even have a prosecution. They may just go and they're done. So better to have that than just anybody does whatever they want to do. Even though there may be that tight-fistedness and that corruption that is there, they still maintain a certain amount of order and discipline within a society, as opposed to the hinges coming off and you never know what's going to happen. So, and he's not making the argument, oppression, just be happy with it. That's not what he's saying. He's saying there are some extremes here. Be careful and understand and appreciate what is there. All right, anything else through verse 9? Okay. We just don't have time, because the next section I have is 10 through 20, and we just don't really have time to go through all of that. Let's answer one question, because we got about 2 minutes. We'll answer question number 4, verse number 10. He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This also is vanity. Why do riches not satisfy? Bill?
It's never enough.
Never enough? More? Any other thoughts?
I think it's your heart that's not going to be satisfied. It may not be the money, it might be something else that just what you want.
Okay. Could be a piece of fruit. Does it satisfy? Fruit. Beautiful to the eyes. Desirable to make one wise. Did that satisfy them?
No.
It did not. The one thing that was forbidden didn't satisfy. Riches won't satisfy. Why? We're not made to be satisfied with those things. We are hardwired, because we're made in the image of God, we are hardwired to only be satisfied in a relationship with God. That's where full satisfaction, contentment, peace, happiness, however you want to put that, that's where it's realized. And the entire book here is really dedicated to the idea, you're not going to find it here, you're not going to find it there, you search for it over there, it's not going to happen. It's your relationship to God. So that's why silver, gold, fruit, or any of these other things can't satisfy us, because that's not the way we're made. It just can't happen. All right, any other thoughts there? All right, thank y'all. Lord willing, we'll press on chapter 5, go on into chapter 6 next week.